Le résultat du vote est le suivant. 72 voix pour, 35 voix contre, 32 abstentions. Le projet de résolution est adopté.
The United States rises to declare before the General Assembly of the United Nations and before the world that it does not acknowledge, it will not abide by, it will never acquiesce in this infamous act.
Very real sense, this is also the new year for the United Nations too. In the spirit of Tashlich, I hope we can cast away the distrust and disagreement of the past year. And as we look ahead, I encourage member states and all our partners to work together for the common good and a better world for all. Thank you very much.
Welcome to a new webinar produced by European Platform for Israel. My name is Thomas Sandell. I'm the founding director.
And I'm Gregory Lafitte, Director for UN Affairs of the European Coalition for Israel.
And today we are honored to be joined by Israel's ambassador to the European Union, Ronny Leshno-Yaar. The theme of this conversation is EU and Israel the day after. Some people that if you lived on a different planet than the rest of us, you may ask the question, what does this mean, the day after what? But if you are interested in the subject that we are all passionate about here, Israel, the future of Israel, the future of the Jewish people, you will all understand that this has to do with the expected announcement on the 1st of July, or actually the implementation on July 1 on extending Israeli sovereignty to Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria and the Jordan Valley. And of course, many of us followed the news very, very closely to see when would the announcement come, what would be the plan, how will it be implemented. Of course, today is the 2nd of July, and there are still many question marks. Some things we do know, but if there's anyone that would know what is the state of play, it's Ambassador Leshno-Yaar. So let us start by asking you to give us a little bit of update. 2nd of July, what do we know? What is the state of play? What can we expect perhaps in the next few days or next few weeks? If we start there, Ambassador Leshno-Yaar.
So good afternoon to all our followers, watchers, listeners. Thomas, Gregory, thank you for having me again. I'm a big fan of your organization and appreciate your support and friendship to the State of Israel, to the Jewish people, and to me personally in my different capacities in the so many years that we know each other in Jerusalem, in Geneva, here in Brussels, the UN, in New York, etc. So thank you very much for that. Especially now in Europe, I need your support and your friendship, because the European scene is especially difficult for Israel, even more than the United Nations scene, because we have higher expectations from our European friends than from others. So again, thank you. I'm not the one who knows best what is happening in the context of the Trump plan. The one person to refer the questions to and to discuss this with is my Prime Minister, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Unfortunately, he cannot be with us today, so I am his acting, but happy to be here. So I would say that at the center of our discussions is the Trump peace vision. And we should keep in mind that we speak about a plan, and it's not even a plan, it's a vision that should be transformed into a plan, and at the end, hopefully, into an agreement. But it's the first stages of the vision, which is being discussed for quite some time now between Israel and the United States of America. Unfortunately, the Palestinians refused to participate in this discussion, even before knowing what is in the Trump vision. And they are digging in the position of the refuseniks, a term that we remember from 40, 50 years ago, from a different context. But they simply, they are unwilling to engage with the Americans, with Israel, and we will regret this. It's very unfortunate, and it comes on top of several situations that we had with the Palestinians in the last 25 years, when good peace plans were put on the table that addressed Palestinian long-time aspirations, and they also said no to those peace proposals, starting with, of course, the Oslo Agreement, then the Camp David Agreement, or the Camp David negotiations that took place in 2000 between Prime Minister Barak and Chairman Arafat, and later Prime Minister Olmert discussed a peace plan with President Abbas, and recently President Obama offered Israel and the Palestinians a peace proposal, and the Palestinians said no. It was Obama, not President Trump. So now we have on the table the Trump peace vision. While we speak, the American envoys are in Jerusalem to discuss this with the Israeli government, and the discussions, I guess, needs more time before we can exhaust them. I cannot speculate at the moment what is the time frame. My Prime Minister spoke about few more days, so I guess that few more days, although days can accumulate to weeks and maybe more than weeks, but the discussions are going on. I have to remind that we have a new government in Israel since last month. It's a very young government, which is different than governments that we had in the last decade in Israel, in the sense that it's a parity government. So the decisions on cardinal issues must be taken by both sides of the government. So it's a discussion which is going on between Israel and the Americans, but also between the two sides of the government. My foreign minister is one of the Israeli politicians deeply involved in this discussion. So this is what we're doing right right now. As you know, all nothing happened yesterday or today until this point of time. I cannot tell when the Prime Minister will have an announcement, but I guess that it will come sooner or later. So that's as an opening statement regarding the Trump peace vision.
May I ask a follow-up question very directly, because we are speaking at the end of the day of Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, including the Jordan Valley. What would you say, what are the key arguments for extending Israeli sovereignty to these Jewish communities? Because, one can have various perspectives. It can be legal, historical, security, practical. But when you have to convince your very difficult audience in Brussels, how do you explain this?
Yeah. So first I have to remind that the Trump plan has more than a territorial component. It has many other components, and you have to look at the plan, the vision as a whole, and not single out only one element, which is what some are doing, some of the friends of Israel, and some who are not so friends of Israel, who are more vocal in their criticism of Israel. So there is a territorial element, but there is also a security element, and there is an economic element, and there is a political element, and there is a regional element. So it's a multifaceted vision that should be discussed simultaneously. And yes, there is a territorial element. And I have to, and I am discussing this with my European colleagues, but first we have to discuss it among ourselves, Israelis. And this discussion is going on in Israel. And as always, it's very passionate and emotional and interesting. Now, without touching upon the details of the territorial dimension of the vision, I will say that you have to consider several factors. First, I'm not sure this is the exact order of things, but first there is a reality on the ground that all must recognize. And the reality on the ground is that first, Israel is controlling the territory for more than 50 years now. And I have to remind people that the territory was under Jordanian control for 19 years only. So we are 3 times longer in that territory than the Jordanians, and even the British mandate. Okay, the Ottoman Empire was there longer than the state of Israel. So first, there is a reality on the ground. Secondly, this reality means that there are hundreds of thousands of Jews living in the areas of Judea and Samaria, and you cannot ignore their presence there. The Israeli government did not force them to go there. They went there for different reasons that we can elaborate later, but they are there on the ground, mostly on territory which was acquired by Israeli Jews sometime before the creation of the State of Israel, and sometimes after 1967. For example, Gush Etzion, which is a territory, one of the settlement blocks not far from Jerusalem, used to host Jewish communities before the War of Independence in 1949. There was no dispute that this is Jewish territory, but we were pushed from that territory by the Jordanian Legion, the Jordanian army in the War of Independence. So Jewish presence is there since day one, long before there was even the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, and Jews will continue to live in Judea. I mean, you cannot see Judea without Jews. And now, we have to keep in mind that the presence of Jordan in that territory was illegal, and no one recognized that presence as legal. Only two countries recognized Jordanian sovereignty, if you will, although it was not sovereignty. It's the UK, which was the mandatory power, and Pakistan, that then was under the British domain. But all other nations of the world did not recognize Jordanian presence, sovereignty, ownership on that piece of land. So it was disputed from day one. And then there is, of course, the historical, as I mentioned, the historical relationship between the Jewish people and Judea and Samaria. No need to tell you the significance of that historical connection. And last but not least, there is the security dimension, that Israel cannot and will not be secure without controlling major chunks of territory west of the Jordan River. There is no question about that. It has been recognized even by the Palestinians in the different negotiations that we had with them in the last 3 decades. And even today, they are saying this by the very fact that they publicly promise not to have a military. Why not have a military? Because they know that Israel cannot accept the presence of non-Israeli military west of the Jordan River. But it goes beyond that when it comes to security considerations. There is no need to elaborate. So there is a range of dimensions that can justify an Israeli interest in continuing its presence in Judea and Samaria. And those are the arguments that I use in my conversation with my colleagues here.
Yes, well, I like the fact that you say multidimensional, that there are multi-dimensions, because when you look at the legal claims for Israel, for Judea and Samaria, of course, it comes back to the mandate, as you said, and what makes it a really international law is this San Remo conference and this San Remo resolution, which together with the Treaty of Sèvres, Lausanne, and the mandate for Palestine, and must add the Article 80 of the UN Charter, makes it. No, you're saying no, not the Article 80?
No, I'm saying to the guys that want to enter my room, not to enter my room.
I thought perhaps we're going to learn something.
No, I totally agree with you.
That with the Article 80 of the UN Charter inscribes all of this in international law. And we've seen this debate many times, and I think so. I was just saying that I like the fact that you say it's multidimensional, because sometimes we forget that even in San Remo 100 years ago, it was multidimensional. It wasn't just political. It wasn't just a legal entity. This resolution. There were so many other things linked to that, and especially one that we like to talk about, but we don't have really much time today. But we'll do it in our own way. Is the cultural aspect, because then in the 1920s there was also this rebirth somehow of the Jewish culture and even the Jewish of the Hebrew language. And I like to go read what the leaders of the time said, and I think many of the Europeans should read what their own leaders said at the time, and especially the French. Many of the French leaders at the time, be it Millerand, be it Painlevé, Aristide Briand, etc., they underlined that they were the first ones to recognize the link between the Jewish people and this land, they were the first one to approve this project. They underlined that they were there before the British, that they recognized it in 1916. And they even, there's this text, and we don't really have time to read it, but one day I'd love to read it in one of those webinars, is this text by Painlevé, who recognizes the link between the French culture and the Jewish culture, and saying if there has to be a Jewish national home, then it has to be linked to France, and it has to even be linked to the French language, but that's another question.
Too late for that.
Yes.
We have a text from relating, going back to our next issue, to look at this more in a European context, from Milan Kundera, the Nobel Prize winner in literature. I believe, Ambassador Leshno-Yaar, you have it there.
Yeah, I have it, and I'm happy to read it. It's from a speech that he gave when he was awarded the Jerusalem Prize in 1985. In fact, I had the text of his the full speech on my table, and I wanted to read a different paragraph from that speech, but I couldn't find it. I didn't have time to look for it, so I will read the paragraph that I have in front of me. So it goes like that, quote unquote. Exiled from their land of origin and thus lifted above nationalist passions, the great Jewish figures have always shown an exceptional feeling for a supranational Europe, a Europe conceived not as territory, but as culture. If the Jews, even after Europe so tragically failed them, nonetheless kept faith with that European cosmopolitanism, Israel, the little homeland finally regained, strikes me as the true heart of Europe, a peculiar heart located outside the body. It's a fantastic statement by a fantastic person. For me, Europe is not only, it's many things, but not only culture, but it's an ideal. Europe is an ideal. This is why the expectation of Israelis from Europeans are so big. Mm. And by and large, Europeans are failing us. You are not you, Thomas, not your group, but Europe in general is not rising up to the expectations that we have from this continent. Now, I know that Europeans have also expectations from us. And I think that we are, and we have to make an effort to rise to your expectations. But when you have only this last Sunday, a big demonstration in the heart of Brussels, an anti-Israeli demonstration, and people are chanting, slaughter the Jews. This is terrible. I saw the video and I was speechless. How come that in 2020, Europeans in a European city, in a center square, are shouting, slaughter the Jews? That's beyond me. Thank you.
Unacceptable. And we will, the way we have structured this conversation is to first go through an update on where we are with the peace plan, and then speak about EU-Israel relations, and the last part about anti-Semitism. So I will come back a little bit on that issue later. Maybe just to say that I'm currently up north in Finland on vacation. In Helsinki, there was also a demonstration on Tuesday, actually 2 demonstrations. You may already have read about it in Jerusalem Post, but I think if there's anything we can say to encourage you is that obviously the enemies of Israel wanted to demonstrate Tuesday night, but within 24 hours, we as Friends of Israel had mobilized double the size of the anti-Israeli demonstration. So I think what media saw and what the general public saw was that there is huge support for Israel. And as Friends of Israel, we need to be more vocal, we need to be more visible. and this is something that we are working at, and you have inspired us in achieving this. But coming back to Milan Kundera and coming back to the connections between Europe and Israel, we have said it, of course, so many times that the notion, the vision of the modern state of Israel, of course, was born in Europe, in the European context, and we speak about cities like Basel and London and San Remo and why not Paris for that matter. But of course, looking at the situation today, exactly as you say, we have come a long way since our European leaders came to San Remo and were excited to see the rebirth of the Jewish state. Why do you think there is this overly critical reaction to Israel in Europe today? I'm sure you have many years to reflect on this, but you also been in very interesting positions, first in Geneva, obviously in Jerusalem, and now in Brussels. So I think what you have to say is very important for us to listen and learn.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to give a direct answer to this question. Clearly, there is an obsession with Israel, an obsession which sometimes is positive, but often is very negative. Up to a point that people here, even in high places, are absolutely ignoring atrocities in different parts of the Middle East. They are mum when it comes to what is going on. I mean, we forgot that the massacres in Syria are going on. We forgot that there is total chaos in Libya, and there are ordinary Libyans who are suffering. We don't care about the falling apart of the Lebanese state because of Hezbollah, and I can go on and on, Yemen, etc. And they again and again focus on Israel. So there is obsession. We had a fantastic moment in the European Parliament last week, 10 days ago. We had quite a significant victory when the European Parliament, I would say almost against all odds, voted in favor of the approval of the EU-Israel aviation agreement. And the majority was impressive, okay? 473 members of parliament voted yes in favor of the agreement, and 102 voted against. So the margin was quite good. But moments before they voted on the EU-Israel agreement, they voted on the EU-China agreement. And 680 MEPs voted yes on the China agreement, whereas only 20 or so voted no. And one member of parliament, who is a strong critic of Israel, complained. I mean, seconds before that, she voted yes on the EU-China agreement, and then she complained how many members of parliament voted in favor of the Israel agreement. So this inability to look at herself and understand that there is something wrong with this attitude with what is going on in China. And you know about the persecution of Muslims in China, not Jews, Muslims in China, okay? So that's telling, that's telling. Now, in the past, I could say that, okay, perhaps other considerations are involved, okay, trade with Arab countries, Arab oil, etc. It doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. I mean, Palestinian refugees are not coming to Europe, not even one. They are not. You have refugees from many other Arab countries, but still the focus is on the Palestinians. There is no Palestinian terror in this continent, thank God. So it's a valid question that you are asking, Tomas, and I think that we should continue to discuss it, so it will be better clear to us how to deal with that obsession. I think I'd better stop here.
Maybe Gregory has the answer.
Oh, no, I don't have the answer, but you know, last week I was in this conference with there were a number of panelists, and one of them was the head of the Middle East and North Africa division of the Quai d'Orsay, and he was confronted with this question of the legal rights of Israel to Judea and Samaria, and he was the title of the conference was about the 100-year anniversary of the San Remo resolution. And so every time someone asked him about this, and they came back several times asking him about what does France do with this conference, this resolution that they are signatories of. He would always repeat the same things, always saying, and he was even reading his paper, saying that that France has believes in the agreed parameters, that they believe in the two-state solution, things that we've heard so many times, these mantras that we hear all the time. And I was on I-24 News yesterday, and I was telling them that it made me think of this character of Melville called Bartleby, who keeps on saying, I would prefer not to. And that's all he can say. And it's exactly this attitude of you know, you tell them these are the legal claims, and you get the same answer all the time. And I believe there that I told I-24 News that they were certainly not expecting that answer, that I think in a way we should give everyone the book of Jonah as a bedside table book, because it's really this message of, yes, truth is important, yes, justice is important, but we shouldn't be stubborn, and we should you know, stubbornness is not okay. So it's truth but without stubbornness, and I think that this is the message that the international community should start discussing with all the different elements, and in particular this San Remo resolution, and not dismiss it all the time, but accept that there would be talks, there would be discussions involving all those elements, and of course with the Palestinian authority, and with everyone in the Palestinian side.
Yeah. Yeah, I will not go into the legal arguments. I'm not an international lawyer, and I know that Israeli lawyers will come with good arguments to counter the other side. But clearly, whatever international law says, and we have great respect for international law, we will not allow anyone or anything to put at risk the security of the Jewish state. And we cannot ignore realities on the ground. My prime minister, if you will ask him about the two-state solution, he will tell you, before we discuss the two-state solution, we have to discuss the two states illusion, which means that, and this is one of my expectations from my European interlocutors here in Brussels. It's not, don't waste your time on pontificating to the Israelis what they should or shouldn't do. You're wasting your time. Instead, you have to go to the Palestinians and tell them that if they want to reach an agreement with Israel, they must understand that they will have to compromise, something that they were unwilling to do until now. That's the role of one of the roles of Europe in this political game. And so far, they refuse to play this role. So I think that one of Israel's friends, talking points, discussing with others the Israeli-Palestinian file, is what is the role of Europe to put pressure on Israel to threaten Israel with measures, with consequences, or to deliver the Palestinians. I think that that's the role of the Europeans, where they can be helpful and constructive.
Like on so many other questions, we agree with you also on this one. And this is our message to the leaders that we are in contact with. Let us move to the last segment in the program, which relates to the first and the second. We are still looking at through the prism of the peace plan, through the prism of the expected announcement. Again, perhaps expected ramifications. I will come back to that to hear what your thoughts are. We take there's a news story every other day from one parliament threatening with this, threatening with that. But my question, and this is the bridge to discussing anti-Semitism, because one of the main points that are raised by so-called friends of Israel, and they always make this point very clear, we are the biggest friends, is to say that if Israel would go in this particular direction, now with extending sovereignty to Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, this would then lead to a spike in anti-Semitism in Europe. And it's for me, it's always problematic because like there was no anti-Semitism in Europe before.
Exactly.
like anti-Semitism is a new thing until the State of Israel was born. And as we would always say, the State of Israel was born because of anti-Semitism. And it wasn't, anti-Semitism didn't come out of the creation of the Jewish state. So it's always a little bit, and for us also quite discouraging, to be honest, when we hear these arguments coming from our Jewish friends in the diaspora in Europe and elsewhere. I'm sure you are familiar with this argument, and it will be interesting to see if you have anything to add.
Yeah. So first, of course, Thomas, I totally agree with you. The anti-Semites don't need excuses to be anti-Semites. They were anti-Semites before the creation of Israel, after the creation of Israel, and they will continue to be anti-Semites. It's for European governments to be more forceful with eradicating this scourge, using law enforcement authorities, education, and other measures to deal with anti-Semitism. So this is an important point. I simply will give you a recent example when we had a kind of similar situation with warnings that it will create anti-Semitism. And this is the decision of President Trump to move the embassy of the United States from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So before that, there were a lot of warnings that there will be violence and attacks on American facilities around the Muslim world, and protests and diplomatic crisis. And frankly, nothing happened. Now, I'm not saying that nothing will happen if and when Israel will take a step in Judea and Samaria. I don't know that, but at least from the little example that we had last year, there was no real reaction from the international community and the Arab world and even the Palestinian street. And I follow and I listen carefully to the voices which are coming out of Arab capitals in the reacting to the Trump plan. Well, 20, 30 years ago, the reaction could be different. Today, there is between silence and mute reaction, symbolic reaction. Clearly, Jordan is vocal, but other than Jordan, I don't see much. And again, I'm not inviting more protests, and I don't know what will develop if and when the government of Israel will take a decision. But Israel will do what is good for Israel, with all the respect and friendship with our immediate and far friends and neighbors. We will do what is good for Israel. Gone are the days that Israel looked for others to defend it, to defend us, to defend the Jewish people. Those days are gone. So yes, we want to maintain our good relations with many Arab countries, the peace agreements with our immediate neighbors, and the friendly relationship with the international community. But we will do what we believe is right and good for the state of Israel.
Yes. When we see all the things going on today, it makes me think of the of this terrible time in the 70s, where there was this idea of presenting Zionism as racism, and this infamous resolution in the General Assembly in 1975. Do you think it's still something that is this idea is coming back again? We hear now and then people raising this question of presenting Zionism as some kind of apartheid, and using this. It seems that it's the same arguments that were used in the 70s. I mean, for us, I must say that a lot of our work at the UN was really inspired by the heroes of that time, of Daniel Patrick Moynihan, and I remember Herzog also. I remember a meeting in your office in Jerusalem a number of years ago, and we were talking about this, and you had this also this book of Gil Troy, which is somewhere here behind me, and it's still an inspiration for us. I mean, it was a terrible time in a way, but it's still an inspiration because there's still a lot to be done. I'm afraid that if you would ask, I know I'm talking about the UN and you know we're talking about the EU, but I'm afraid that if you would ask some diplomats, they haven't realized that this resolution was rescinded, that it's over. What would you say on this question?
My deputy here in this embassy is an Arab Israeli. We have a Supreme Court judge who is an Arab Israeli that sent a former Israeli president to jail. We have generals in the army and in the police force who are Arab Israelis. The second biggest political party in the Israeli parliament is comprised of 14 Arab Israelis and 1 Jewish Israeli. You go to a hospital in Jerusalem, the staff, half of the staff, doctors and nurses are Palestinians, Arab Israelis, and even Palestinians from Judea and Samaria. I don't think that there is any Arab in the Middle East which enjoys more rights and freedoms than the Arabs in the state of Israel. In fact, you know, an element in the Trump vision was kind of, I mean, this is no longer, I think, valid, but kind of a transfer of population. So some Arab Israeli villages will become part of the Palestinian state in return for settlements, Jewish communities that will become part of Israel. And the outrage by Arab Israelis that refused to join the Palestinian state was such that you could ask yourself, wait, if Israel is such a racist country with apartheid, why they want so much to be part of Israel? Yeah. Which means that this is ridiculous. But accusations against Israel as being racist, etc., existed before 67, after 67. I cannot, you know, I will continue to fight that notion, but this is not serious, and all those who know Israel knows that this is ridiculous. Israel is a model for the region. Unfortunately, I don't see any Arab countries coming even near to the norms and values of Israel anytime soon.
Yes, it's true that Israel is a light to the nations, and And for a Palestinian, if we call it a state or autonomous authority or whatever, I couldn't think of a better neighbor. When you look very practically, it's like starting a new nation next to Singapore or Silicon Valley, but Israel too. So our point has always been to say that, you know, we need to promote cooperation as much as we can. Drawing to a close, and I understand you are a busy man these next days, so we are not going to extend this conversation as long as we would like to. But I'd like to get back to San Remo, and you know how we have had this on our mind for such a long time, first with the 90th anniversary and now with the 100th anniversary. And our thinking has been that, and we brought this up with Felix Klein, the Federal Commissioner, you know, for Jewish Life in Germany, last week in a webinar, and he agreed, and he said that there is a lack of knowledge of the pre-war history. So starting with San Remo and the British Mandate, because as long as we have this understanding that Israel somehow was born out of the ashes of the Holocaust, which has some symbolic meaning, of course, but this can easily be turned around as a legal argument, and then we are stuck. So how important do you think it is that that Israel uses the argument of San Remo much more forcefully? And I think as friends of Israel, and I've had a number of friends in the parliament who have also raised up the issue and said that, you know, listen, we speak about Judea and Samaria, not primarily about the West Bank, because Judea and Samaria has been around forever, and the West Bank is a fairly new creation. How much do you think an in-depth study of what happened 100 years ago and a willingness to recognize and to celebrate this centenary could have a positive ramification for the state of Israel? I will just add to say that we sent out some 90 letters to government leaders where we gave them a summary of the San Remo resolution. And as we asked for a reply, it meant that someone had to read it. And I think in most cases, probably for the first time in their life. But many replied and did so very nicely, including the Prime Minister of Italy, who said that you know, one of the seeds of the Israeli olive tree were planted in Italy. And I think for many of us, it helps to go back before the current conflict and just look at the excitement that was there 100 years ago and the backing that it had from the European powers from the time. And I think that there is a negligence. It's not so much that they wouldn't be interested, but somehow we haven't been too good at raising this issue in the debate. So on this centenary, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are and perhaps how we can work together post-corona, you know, 19 in COVID-19 in a European context as well.
Sure. So as a final note, let me say the following. First, again, Thomas, thank you and your colleagues for being such good friends and supporters of Israel. We don't take it for granted, and we appreciate your support. Secondly, I have to remind that yesterday Germany assumed the European presidency, and high on their agenda is the issue of combating anti-Semitism. And they plan a series of events on the national but also European level to advocate for more forceful European reaction to this phenomenon, which is still very much with us in Europe. And I also must say that this commission, under the leadership of President Ursula von der Leyen, with the help of good people in the Commission, including Katharina von Schnurbein, the special coordinator, are really very active and committed to the fight against anti-Semitism. Now, in this coming Saturday, in the synagogues, Jews all over the world will read the portion of Balak. Balak, the pagan king of Moab, that was afraid of the people of Israel on the way from Egypt. At the end of the 40 years tour, the people of Israel were camping outside the land of Israel next to the Jordan River, and that pagan king Balak wanted to send a magician of the times, Bileam, to curse the people of Israel. And instead of cursing the people of Israel, that magician blessed the people of Israel, because this is what God told him. And one of the blessings is, he said that the people of Israel are a nation that dwells alone. And there is a big discussion in Judaism, all the new Judaism, is it a good thing or bad thing? And I'm telling you that it's not good that we are alone. We don't want to be alone. We want to be part of the international community, part of the international norm system, part of the international legal system, so that we can use this San Remo argument as one of the many good arguments that we have if we will come to that legal/historical discussion about rights of the Jewish people in Judea and Samaria. So the San Remo argument is a very valid one, a very relevant one, very important one that we will use when we come to that discussion. We will continue to argue for that, and we cannot allow the other side to pick and choose the arguments that are beneficial to his political line. There are many arguments, and at the end, it's not a legal discussion only, or it's mainly not a legal discussion. It should be a realistic discussion that should take into account the realities on the ground, Israel's security needs, the aspirations of the other side, and the regional perspective. The region needs a strong, stable, secured, prosperous, innovative, and happy state of Israel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gregory, I think you have a closing word.
Well, I just wanted to read just a bit more of this text that you read an excerpt from. Unfortunately, I have the text. Well, it's not unfortunately, but I have the text in French, which was the adopted language of Milan Kundera, and so perhaps that's the part you wanted to read, Ambassador. But I hope it is. Let's see. Qu'est-ce que le roman? Il y a un proverbe juif admirable. L'homme pense, Dieu rit. Inspiré par cette sentence, j'aime imaginer que François Rabelais a entendu un jour le rire de Dieu et que c'est ainsi que l'idée du premier grand roman européen est née. Il me plaît de penser que l'art du roman est venu au monde comme l'écho du rire de Dieu. Un des échecs de l'Europe est de n'avoir jamais compris l'art le plus européen, le roman. Ni son esprit, ni ses immenses connaissances et découvertes, ni l'autonomie de son histoire. L'art inspiré par le rire de Dieu est par son essence non pas tributaire, mais contradicteur des certitudes idéologiques. À l'instar de Pénélope, il défait pendant la nuit la tapisserie que des théologiens, des philosophes, des savants ont ourdie la veille. I'll just end with this two last sentences of his speech. Mais il est temps de m'arrêter. I should stop. J'étais en train d'oublier que Dieu rit quand il me voit penser. I was began to forget that God laughs when he sees me think.
Thank you, Ambassador Leshno-Yaar, Ronny. It's been a special privilege for us, for Gregory and myself, to walk together with you all these years, and remember so well our first visit to your office in Jerusalem. And That was many years ago, but we are happy to walk with you and support you when we can. And we also want to congratulate the State of Israel for knowing that the faith of Israel is in such good hands in Europe and in Brussels, which is not an easy place for an Israeli, but you have done a great job, and we look forward also to meeting again soon outside of this Zoom format in person. So all the best to you these next few days and weeks. And I want to thank Gregory, of course, and we want to say thank you to all those who have been watching us, and we will let you know when our next webinar will take place. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For us, the Jewish people, this is no more than a piece of paper, and we shall treat it as such. Thank you, Mr. President.